You know that nagging sensation when something feels off, but you can't quite put your finger on it. Like you're making choices that don't feel entirely your own, as if invisible strings are pulling you in directions you never consciously chose. Maybe you found yourself saying yes when every fiber of your being wanted to say no, or trusting someone who later revealed their true colors, leaving you questioning your own judgment. If any of this rings true, and trust me, it does for most of us, then you need to hear what I'm about to tell you. The uncomfortable reality is that you're being influenced and controlled every single day by people around you who understand the hidden mechanics of human psychology better than you understand yourself. Here's what makes this particularly insidious. The most effective forms of influence don't feel like control at all. They make you believe you're the one calling the shots, that every decision was yours, that any mistakes were simply your own poor judgment. Meanwhile, you're actually being moved around like a chess piece by players who know exactly which emotional buttons to push. Most people spend their entire lives in this state, subtly guided by forces they never recognize, and when they finally try to break free, they're hit with waves of guilt, self-doubt, and fear that keep them locked in place. These emotional responses aren't accidents. They're carefully cultivated reactions designed to maintain the status quo. If you're thinking this doesn't apply to you, pause right there. That's precisely the mindset that makes someone an ideal target. I'm not here to make you feel better about yourself or offer empty reassurances. I'm here to give you practical tools for recognizing and defending against these subtle forms of psychological manipulation. The masters of influence, as figures like Machiavelli understood centuries ago, don't need to raise their voices or make threats. They simply watch, learn your patterns, and then use your own psychology against you. They understand what motivates you better than you do, and until you develop that same level of self-awareness, you'll continue being influenced without even realizing it. In this video, you're going to learn how to spot manipulation tactics before they take hold, understand your own psychological vulnerabilities, and build genuine mental defenses. You'll discover how to maintain your autonomy even in close relationships where emotional manipulation runs deepest. But I need to warn you up front. Once you start seeing these patterns, you can't unsee them. Your relationships, your workplace dynamics, even your relationship with media and advertising will never look the same. If you're ready for that level of clarity, then let's dive in. Before we go further, if this content is already resonating, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Your support helps me continue creating content that actually makes a difference in people's lives. Have you ever wondered why certain individuals always seem to get their way, even when their requests seem unreasonable? They don't argue, demand, or plead. Instead, they have this uncanny ability to make you feel like giving them what they want was your brilliant idea all along. This isn't natural charisma, it's a learned skill set, a sophisticated understanding of human psychology in action. The skilled influencer operates like a psychological detective. They're constantly gathering intelligence about you. Your insecurities, your values, what makes you feel validated, what triggers your guilt or fear. They notice when you desperately want approval, when you're afraid of conflict, when you feel obligated to reciprocate kindness. This psychological mapping happens before any actual request is made. It starts with careful observation of your body language, your tone of voice, the topics that make you light up or shut down. Some operators rely heavily on charm. They shower you with attention, make you feel uniquely understood, position themselves as different from everyone else who's let you down. But underneath this apparent warmth lies cold calculation. They're creating what psychologists call an obligation debt, making you feel like you owe them something. Others prefer the guilt route. They position themselves as overwhelmed, misunderstood, or abandoned by everyone except you. They gradually place you in a caretaking role where you feel responsible for their emotional well-being. When you try to establish boundaries or prioritize your own needs, they don't need to argue a disappointed sigh, a hurt expression, or a subtle comment about how you're changing is enough to pull you back in line. Then there are those who operate through fear-based scenarios. They paint pictures of what terrible things might happen if you don't comply with their wishes. You'll end up alone, you'll miss out on opportunities, you'll regret not listening to them. They don't cage you with physical force. They cage you with constructed realities that make independence seem impossible or terrifying. These tactics aren't modern inventions. Niccolo Machiavelli, writing in the 16th century, understood that human beings are fundamentally driven by self-interest and emotion, and that those who grasp these drives can shape other people's realities. He famously wrote that men judge more with their eyes than with their hands, because everyone can see but few can touch. In other words, perception often matters more than reality. This is exactly how psychological manipulation works. It's theater designed to look and feel like authentic interaction. The manipulator becomes the director, casting you in a role you never auditioned for, writing scripts you never agreed to perform, and somehow convincing you that you're improvising freely. But here's the crucial insight. This theater only works because there's something within you that allows it to work. Some unhealed wound, some unmet need, some unconscious pattern that creates an opening for influence. Until you understand and address these vulnerabilities, you'll continue finding yourself in these dynamics, calling them friendship, love, loyalty, or respect. Let's examine what makes someone susceptible to these influence tactics, because awareness of your own weak spots is your first line of defense. You don't become a target because you're weak or foolish. You become a target because you're human, and every human has psychological blind spots, areas where emotion overrides logic, where past wounds create present vulnerabilities, where unconscious needs make us predictable. Many people carry what I call approval hunger, a deep, often unconscious craving for external validation. This usually develops in childhood when love and acceptance came with conditions. Be good, be quiet, be impressive, be grateful. The child learns that affection is something to be earned rather than something they inherently deserve. This creates adults who unconsciously shape their behavior around other people's approval, who have difficulty saying no, who prioritize keeping others happy over their own well-being. The approval-hungry person is like a lighthouse beacon for manipulative personalities. These operators offer small doses of validation and receive massive returns in compliance and loyalty. They understand exactly what to say to make you feel seen and valued, and in exchange, you gradually surrender your autonomy. Others carry what might be called guilt programming, a persistent sense that prioritizing their own needs is somehow selfish or wrong. These individuals struggle with boundary setting because they've been taught that self-care equals selfishness, that saying no is unkind, that their worth comes from how much they sacrifice for others. They feel guilty for having preferences, guilty for taking up space, guilty for not being endlessly available. Manipulators recognize this guilt programming instantly. They present themselves as people who only want what's best for you, who are just looking out for your interests. They use your own moral compass against you, making you feel like a bad person for resisting their influence. Then there's fear-based vulnerability, the terror of abandonment, rejection, or isolation. People with this pattern often stay in unhealthy situations because being alone feels worse than being mistreated. They'll accept minimal consideration rather than risk having no connection at all. Fear-based manipulators offer a false sense of security while simultaneously threatening to withdraw it. They make you feel like you'd be lost without them, that no one else would want you, that independence is just another word for loneliness. All of these vulnerabilities have origins. They don't appear randomly. They develop from childhood experiences, family dynamics, past relationships, social conditioning. Trauma doesn't always look like dramatic abuse. Sometimes it's simply growing up in an environment where your authentic self wasn't welcome, where love came with strings attached, where your needs were consistently deprioritized. Machiavelli understood this psychological landscape centuries ago. He knew that effective control doesn't require force, just accurate knowledge of human weakness. As he put it, the nature of man is variable, and it is easy to convince him of something, but difficult to keep him convinced. The skilled manipulator doesn't waste time trying to convince you of anything. They simply identify what you already fear or desire and position themselves as the solution. But here's what Machiavelli also understood. Knowledge is power. When you can see the game being played, you can choose whether or not to participate. When you understand your own psychological patterns, you can start making conscious choices instead of reactive ones. In the next section, we're going to build what I call emotional immunity. The ability to maintain your center even when others are trying to destabilize you for their own purposes. Most people want to stop being manipulated, but few are willing to do what emotional freedom actually requires, developing brutal self-awareness and the courage to act on it. Because the truth about psychological manipulation is that your kindness, empathy, and desire to maintain harmony, all genuinely positive qualities, become weapons against you when they're not balanced with clear thinking and strong boundaries. Building emotional immunity isn't about becoming cold or cynical. It's about becoming conscious. It's about stopping the automatic responses that manipulative people count on and replacing them with intentional choices. The first step is pattern recognition. You need to become a detective of your own behavior. What specific triggers make you compliant? Is it the fear of seeming difficult, the anxiety of disappointing someone, the discomfort of conflict? When you can identify your own buttons, you can start choosing whether or not to let others push them. This requires what I call strategic detachment, the ability to observe situations emotionally without immediately getting swept up in them. It means pausing before responding to compliments, criticism, or requests. It means asking yourself, what is this person trying to accomplish right now? What do they want me to feel or do? The master manipulator relies on your emotional urgency. They need you to react quickly before you have time to think clearly. Your defense is to slow things down, take time to process, sleep on decisions, consult trusted friends who aren't invested in the outcome. Next, you need to become unpredictable. Manipulative people work by mapping your responses. They know that if they use a certain tone, you'll back down. If they compliment you, you'll let your guard drop. If they seem hurt, you'll rush to fix things. Your power lies in disrupting these patterns. Start saying no when they expect compliance. Remain silent when they expect argument. Walk away when they expect you to chase. This doesn't mean being deliberately difficult. It means refusing to be emotionally predictable. Another crucial element is building what psychologists call differentiation, a clear sense of where you end and others begin. The more solid your sense of self, the less you need external validation, and the less power others have over you. Manipulative people thrive on controlling your self-concept. They want you to see yourself through their eyes, to need their approval to feel good about yourself. When your internal vision is stable, external manipulation loses its effectiveness. You know who you are independently of what others think, say, or do. This is ongoing work, not a one-time realization. Emotional immunity develops through consistent practice. Practicing sitting with discomfort instead of rushing to fix things. Practicing saying no without over-explaining yourself. Practicing maintaining your position even when others express disappointment. Machiavelli wrote that men must either be caressed or annihilated. for they will revenge themselves for small injuries but cannot do so for great ones. This might sound harsh, but it reveals an important truth about interpersonal dynamics. There's no neutral ground in relationships where power is being negotiated. Either you maintain agency over your own emotional state, or others will attempt to control it for their benefit. But what happens when the manipulator isn't someone you can simply avoid? What if they live in your home, share your workspace, or hold power over aspects of your life you can't easily change? This brings us to the most challenging aspect of emotional independence, dealing with manipulation in close relationships. Recognizing manipulation from strangers is one thing. Confronting it from people you love, family members, romantic partners, close friends, authority figures, is exponentially more difficult because it requires you to acknowledge that care and control often coexist in the same relationship. Intimate manipulation is particularly insidious because it comes wrapped in familiarity and affection. It doesn't announce itself with obvious red flags. Instead, it develops gradually, creating new normals that slowly erode your sense of self until you can't. In romantic relationships, this might look like a partner who claims to know you better than you know yourself, who makes decisions about your social life, career, or appearance under the guise of caring about you. They might say things like, "I only worry because I love you," or "You know you're not good with these kinds of decisions." Statements that sound protective but actually undermine your confidence in your own judgment. Family manipulation often hides behind tradition and obligation. Parents or relatives who haven't learned healthy ways to maintain connection sometimes use guilt, fear, or obligation to keep adult children compliant. They might say things like, "After everything I've done for you," or "Family always comes first," turning natural love into a form of emotional debt. Workplace manipulation can masquerade as mentorship or opportunity. A boss or colleague might create an environment where you feel you have to prove your loyalty through overwork, acceptance of inappropriate behavior, or compromise of your values. They might frame unreasonable demands as growth opportunities, or make you feel like you should be grateful for treatment that's actually problematic. In all these scenarios, the manipulation works because there's something real at stake: genuine love, family connection, professional advancement. The manipulator doesn't create these bonds. They exploit bonds that already exist. Here's what makes this particularly painful. Proximity doesn't justify psychological violation. Love doesn't grant someone the right to control your thoughts, feelings, or choices through guilt, fear, or obligation. Gratitude doesn't require you to accept treatment that diminishes your well-being. Breaking free from intimate manipulation requires a different approach than simply walking away. It requires what I call loving boundaries. The ability to maintain connection with someone while refusing to accept unacceptable behavior. This starts with clear communication about what you will and won't accept, delivered without anger or justification. A simple, "I don't discuss my personal decisions," or "I won't continue this conversation if you speak to me that way," establishes your position without escalating conflict. Then comes the harder part, maintaining those boundaries when they're tested, because they will be tested. The manipulative person will likely escalate their tactics when their usual approaches stop working. They might become more critical, more emotional, or more threatening. This is normal. It's called an extinction burst in psychology, where unwanted behavior temporarily increases when it stops being rewarded. Your job during this phase is to remain consistent. Don't explain yourself repeatedly, don't negotiate your basic boundaries, and don't take responsibility for the other person's emotional reactions to your new clarity. Sometimes, loving someone means stepping away from the dynamic you've shared. It means refusing to enable unhealthy patterns by continuing to participate in them. This isn't about punishment or retaliation. It's about creating space for both people to develop healthier ways of relating. This choice requires tremendous courage because it often involves tolerating short-term relationship disruption for long-term psychological health. It means accepting that some people may not be able or willing to relate to you in healthy ways, even people you care about deeply. But when you can navigate close relationships from a place of strength rather than need, when you can love without losing yourself, you develop a clarity that transforms every area of your life. You start seeing through surface presentations to underlying motivations, not with cynicism, but with wisdom. Machiavelli's insights aren't just about political maneuvering. They're about understanding human nature clearly enough to navigate it skillfully. And in our current world, where influence tactics are more sophisticated and pervasive than ever, this clarity isn't optional if you want to maintain psychological freedom. Let's explore how to apply strategic thinking in daily life to maintain sovereignty over your own mind and choices. Machiavelli wrote for people who had to navigate complex power dynamics where getting it wrong could mean losing everything. His approach was ruthlessly practical. Understand how influence really works, develop strategies based on reality rather than idealism, and never confuse what you wish were true with what actually is true. This mindset is essential for thriving psychologically in the modern world, where you're constantly bombarded with messages designed to influence your choices, beliefs, and self-concept. Social media algorithms, advertising, political messaging, even casual conversations often contain elements designed to push you toward particular conclusions or actions. Those who don't understand this are shaped by it unconsciously. Those who do understand it can choose how to respond. Strategic thinking begins with what Machiavelli called effectual truth, focusing on what actually works rather than what should work in an ideal world. This means evaluating people based on their consistent actions rather than their stated intentions. It means recognizing that everyone, including yourself, operates from self-interest, even when that self-interest includes caring for others. This isn't cynicism, it's clarity. When you understand that people generally act in ways they believe will benefit them, you can predict behavior more accurately and protect yourself more effectively. In practical terms, this means learning to read situations and people like Machiavelli read political dynamics. Pay attention to what people do when they think no one important is watching. Notice patterns in how they treat people who can't benefit them. Observe whether their actions align with their stated values over time, not just in moments of high visibility. One of Machiavelli's most important insights was the power of controlled emotional expression. He understood that showing too much of your internal state gives others information they can use against you. In modern relationships, this translates to strategic disclosure, sharing authentically with people who have earned that level of access while maintaining appropriate privacy with those who haven't. This doesn't mean being fake or manipulative yourself. It means being selective about vulnerability based on evidence of trustworthiness rather than hope or assumption. Another key principle is maintaining what Machiavelli called optionality, always having multiple choices available rather than becoming dependent on any single relationship, job, or situation for your well-being. The person with options can't be easily controlled because they're not desperate for any particular outcome. Practically, this means developing diverse sources of fulfillment, maintaining multiple social connections, building transferable skills, and avoiding putting all your emotional or practical eggs in one basket. Machiavelli also understood the importance of timing. He knew that the same action could be brilliant or disastrous depending on when it was taken. In personal relationships, this translates to choosing your moments carefully, knowing when to address problems, when to remain silent, when to assert yourself, and when to withdraw. Perhaps most importantly, Strategic thinking requires taking complete responsibility for your own emotional state and choices. This is the opposite of victim thinking. Instead of focusing on how others make you feel or what they should do differently, you focus on your own responses and decisions. This doesn't mean accepting unacceptable behavior. It means recognizing that your power lies in how you choose to respond to whatever happens around you. When you truly internalize this responsibility, you become nearly impossible to manipulate because your well-being doesn't depend on others' choices. You might prefer that people treat you well, but you don't need it for your psychological stability. This level of internal sovereignty is what Machiavelli would recognize as true strength, not the ability to control others, but the ability to remain centered and clear regardless of what others choose to do. Now, let's address the ultimate question. How do you transform all this understanding into genuine freedom from external psychological control? We've reached the heart of everything we've discussed, and it comes down to this. As long as you're not deliberately directing your own mind, someone or something else will direct it for you. This isn't necessarily malicious. Often it's unconscious conditioning from family, culture, media, or past experiences that continues to influence your choices without your awareness. True psychological freedom means taking complete ownership of your mental and emotional states. It means recognizing that your thoughts, feelings, and reactions are yours to choose, even when others are trying very hard to influence them in particular directions. This level of sovereignty requires you to question everything you've accepted as automatically true about yourself and your relationships. It means examining beliefs you've never questioned. That you must be polite even when someone is being inappropriate, that you're responsible for other people's feelings, that avoiding conflict is always the right choice, that you owe explanations for your personal decisions. Many of these beliefs were installed during childhood when you had no choice but to adapt to survive in your family system. But what worked for a powerless child often becomes self-sabotage for a capable adult. The process of psychological liberation often involves grieving the illusion that everyone has good intentions. It requires accepting that some people, including people you care about, may not know how to relate in healthy ways. It demands that you tolerate the discomfort of other people's disappointment when you stop being who they want you to be and start being who you actually are. This isn't about becoming selfish or insensitive. It's about developing what psychologists call healthy selfishness, taking responsibility for your own well-being so you can engage with others from strength rather than neediness. You'll know you've achieved genuine psychological independence when you can maintain your center regardless of others' emotions, when you can hear criticism without immediately accepting it as truth, when you can receive compliments without becoming dependent on them, when you can say no without guilt and yes without resentment. This level of clarity allows you to engage authentically with others because you're not constantly managing your image or trying to control their perceptions. You can be genuinely present because you're not simultaneously monitoring for threats to your self-concept. The irony of psychological independence is that it often improves your relationships rather than damaging them. When you're not desperate for approval, when you're not trying to manage others' emotions, when you can set boundaries without anger, you become much more enjoyable to be around for people who are capable of healthy connection. Those who can't relate to you without control or manipulation will often distance themselves, which is actually a gift even though it might feel painful initially. What you do with this understanding is entirely up to you. You can return to unconscious patterns, hoping that awareness alone will protect you, or you can begin the ongoing practice of psychological sovereignty, consistently choosing your responses rather than reacting automatically, building relationships based on mutual respect rather than need, and creating a life that reflects your authentic values rather than others' expectations. I want to hear from you in the comments. When was the moment you realized you were being psychologically influenced in ways you hadn't recognized? What was the situation that made you see the dynamics clearly for the first time? Or are you currently in a situation where you recognize manipulation, but aren't sure how to respond differently? Share your experience. Speaking about these patterns out loud is often the first step in breaking them. If this video has been valuable for you, there's much more depth in my ebook that explores these psychological dynamics through the lens of Carl Jung's insights about the unconscious mind. You'll find the link in the pinned comment below. It's a resource that will deepen your understanding of your own psychological patterns and how to transform them. Don't stop here. Watch the next video in this series, where we explore how to rebuild relationships and social dynamics from a foundation of psychological strength rather than unconscious need. Each piece of understanding builds on the last, creating a comprehensive framework for authentic living. The truth doesn't just set you free, it transforms your entire relationship with yourself and the world around you. See you in the next video.